Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It is Wednesday, February 22nd, another Knapsack presented webinar. Today's topic is build a sustainable and scalable workflow around design tokens. We're excited to be here. We got a few speakers for you today. We got Mr. Evan Lovely, our head of product and engineering, also one of our co-founders and chief architects who wears a lot of hats. We got Mr. Mark Reynolds, a design systems expert. Many of you on this call might already be aware of his work. My name is Jake Love. I'm a solutions architect. Good chance I've also worked with many of you as well. So we're excited. We got a great agenda for us today. Design tokens are essential to creating a consistent, unified brand experience across multiple platforms. But how do you effectively manage these tokens so that they can be easily shared and scaled? We're going to answer that today. Our agenda is running through introductions. So we're going to go through some high-level concepts and definitions. That's going to be led by Mr. Mark Reynolds. Next, I'm going to jump in. We're going to go through the section Unified and Scalable, talking about how theming with design tokens really is a solid process for building that sustainable and scalable workflow. We're going to go over the approach, some common strategies and considerations we've seen over the years of doing this with our customers. I'm going to round this out with a live demo showing theming with design tokens inside of Knapsack. And then we're going to have a vision and roadmap from Evan, our head of product engineering, and lastly, wrap that up with some QA. So let's go ahead and start this off. We're going to toss it over to you, Mark.
So yeah, if there's a bit of feedback, I do apologize. Other than that, yeah, I'll crack on. So thanks, an amazing intro, Jake. So I'm here today to really just do the very simple, like what are design tokens? It's basically just a recap very quickly as an intro into what we're going to be talking about today. So very simply, tokens are design decisions codified. So all these decisions that we make around things that we do on a daily basis or what we use on a daily basis, such as typography, size, spacing, color, border, and elevation. So these are all tokens that we use on a regular basis throughout all the different pathways, whether that's design, engineering, all of those different things. And those tokens are basically those design decisions with font sizes, font weights, etc., all codified for us. And I just want to do a quick swing back to 2014 when Sonka Road from Salesforce was kind of let's say leading a bit of a charge on this with cascading kind of styles and things. At Salesforce, they were trying to create a way of doing that, and I think the modern way of us thinking about these tokens and naming this thing, these design decisions tokens, coming out of that. So so that's kind of what we're here to kind of chat about today. So to kind of move that forward a little bit, I'm going to read this out as like a statement, but design tokens are a fundamental approach for delivering consistency cross-platform. So tokens, we understand as these design decisions, and then now it's they're an actual approach. They're not just this thing that we need to do or thing that we need to think about. They are a change. They are a fundamental change for us delivering what we do today. So this might be very sort of, let's say, new, or it's very well known depending on what angle you're coming from today. But this is just an example of a very easy way to understand maybe the levels of design tokens or what you need to go through when you're thinking about design tokens. So I'm just going to quickly sort of map this. So on the left hand side at the top we've got purple 400. So let's say we've done a numeric scale for our purple palette, all the way from 100 to say 1000, etc. And purple 400 is there as one of our tokens, our color tokens, and it holds a base value, a hard-coded base value, a hex value that you can see there. And then that actual token can feed into the color primary, which is our brand theme expression token. So we've got base level token feeding into our color primary, our brand and theme expression token. And if we want to, we can also go to the next level, which is the component specific level, which is button primary background color, which can use the aliases above. So purple 400 or color primary and those can feed into the button primary background color. So you can see you get this lovely cascading effect. If you change one thing at one level, you're not like worried that it's gonna break everywhere and you have to spend months trying to fix things in different platforms or different spaces. And Jake's actually going to go ahead and sort of go into detail on this kind of stuff and do a bit of a flip between these two things and how you approach this a little bit later on. But that's just like a little background, like what we're talking about today. And yeah, basically back over to you, Jake, to do the hard work, right?
Thank you very much, Mark. Super appreciate that. Yeah, and I think this is like a super solid concept, especially for when we really do think about like setting up the future state of our design system and how we're actually going to like assemble these themes. So speaking of themes, we're going to talk about that in the context of designing with tokens and building with tokens. And we're going to answer this question at a high level. What is theming? Because since I said theming with design tokens is that process for creating that sustainable approach, let's answer this question. In a more general or a flat sense, theming is the act of applying stylistic expression to structured markup. Stylistic expression being CSS as the end result. Same thing for structured markup that ends up being HTML. How we arrive at that CSS and HTML doesn't really matter, but that's the flat sense of theming. In the world of design systems, it's a little bit different. Theming is the process of assigning stylistic decisions to a curated component library. So in this case, the stylistic decisions are design tokens. Go ahead and just like underscore that one for this talk. Global and base styles, utility classes, etc. And then of course, our component library is the coded components. And I want to get this out of the way too, right away. There's no one right way to structure this. As with all choose your own adventure games, this is all determined by your specific situation. And this comes down to the constraints imposed by frameworks, platform-specific requirements, supported tech stacks, corporate technical requirements. We all know that one, etc. Let's talk about some common use cases for theming and design systems. Multi-brand, which is one of the things that we're sort of highlighting today, how we can create a sustainable approach for scaling the design system, supporting this multi-brand effort. And so multi-brand is one of those things that folks are using this for. Presentation modes. This is something we've seen for a long time, dark and light modes. And of course, white labeling, which is platform level enablement for theming for your users. Keep your eyes out for another talk on probably white labeling specific, because that's kind of a fun topic when you start to get to unlocking the power at the enterprise level for sub-brands. Now, before we go too much further, I'm going to get a little technical before going full technical. And we're going to do a quick refresher here on design tokens in the raw sense versus the artifacts, which are the compiled version of those tokens. And so on the left-hand side, we've got the representation for the raw state of design tokens. And in that state, design tokens are format agnostic. We're not really concerned about the end result of what this token is going to take as the shape in the end. All we care at this point is naming it the right thing and giving it the correct value. Design tokens are, as I was just saying, key value pairs in themselves. Design tokens can be cross-referenced. This was calling back to the slide that Mark ran through, where we saw that our color palette was able to be referenced in our color brand primary. And we'll also see this again in the live demo that I'm going to run through. And then lastly, design tokens remove magic numbers. And I'll also talk about this a little bit more, but real quick, magic numbers are that thing when you're looking through code and suddenly you see a random pixel value of 328, and there's no explanation for why that is. Design tokens help to eliminate that vagueness in code. And so then through a compilation process, and this is something that we provide in our stack through Knapsack, we get these artifacts. And so artifacts are the final state of the tokens. They adhere to specifications. They are published as NPM packages, or they can be distributed in other ways. We actually released the ability for folks to be able to download their bundles just through the UI. And lastly, artifacts are used to build components. And there's lots of ways that that can take a shape. And we'll look at some of that stuff as we keep on moving. So bringing all this together, how do these design tokens enhance this theming process and sort of give us the ability to kind of iterate and move with speed? Well, design tokens remove guesswork, and instead they increase development velocity and provide a solid brand-centric source of truth for the smallest repeatable aspects of your system. Remember that is really design thinking, and working in your design system is what common problems can we build into our system that are able, or what common solutions can we build into our system that are repeatable? So then we get down to design tokens allow teams to focus on innovation and adding new value, all while being able to rely on brand consistency that's already built into the stack. And those are those pre-made design decisions that we referenced earlier. Design tokens provide a common language and definition. And that's super important. You need to be calling things with the same names. And this allows teams that are cross-functional to really work together. So designers, developers, product owners, everyone can work confidently together. And lastly, design tokens provide a subatomic stylistic structure and hierarchy, enabling teams to generate new themes through the use of tokens and a mapping layer. So, what the common organization structure, ranges for how people do this with their tokens. A lot of times you've got global tokens, which are things like spacing, font size, breakpoints. This is a lot of the things that, again, Mark was kind of calling out earlier in some of the presentation he was giving. Then we've got another layer, which is like brand specific. A lot of times this is where we're actually referencing things in the global space. We've got modes, light and dark. We've got the segments. And of course, we've got the component level where you can actually apply these tokens directly to components. Let's talk about some things to consider when we're planning these themes. Some of those things are source design decisions and how we're going to structure these design tokens. Styling engine. So, the implementation flow of how we're going to use this downstream is heavily dictated by the styling engine. Coded components, the templates you're going to be applying these things to, and of course, the implementation approach, which is the model used to curate and propagate the themes. Now, I'm not going to go too far into this. I'm not going to be reading all this stuff because we actually have a separate webinar that goes specifically into like planning for themes, and we go really deep into getting into this. But the main things that I wanted to call out is that you're either really going to be handling complexity on the token side or complexity on the build side. Complexity on the token side is mapping that happens by reference, and you usually end up with a single design token, even though the value is identical. And then, of course, you've also got the complexity and build side, which mapping happens in the mapping layer, which is usually a separate style sheet with where the themes are and the variables are mapped. And that's usually reliant on like a cascade. And we'll see that sort of in this next layout here. So out of these approaches, there's three main ways that we see this. Static theming, which is common with SAS and less. Usually you get a self-contained CSS artifact. Doesn't usually require any other assets. It could contain one or all of the themes. Usually relies on a parent class to toggle the different classes. Then we've got root level theming, which is common with CSS or more hybrid approaches. Usually contains 3 or more levels in your cascade. And so you've got level 1, which is generally your design tokens. Level 2 is a mapping layer where the root level definitions are mapped to theme specific tokens. And level 3 is generally the stylistic foundation. Those are the base styles, the global styles that all things will inherit. And of course, the thing to call it here is this relies on the cascade and the inclusion of CSS assets. And order is important when we consider this approach. And then lastly, we've got component level theming, which is really more specific for dynamic frameworks like React or Vue. So depending on the framework, there's lots of different tools and libraries to help you achieve this component level styling. And for example, in React, you might use styled components or vanilla extract. You could then import JSON design tokens and do just about anything with them. So how do we do all of this inside of Knapsack? Well, we've got two things here. We've got our token engine and we've got asset sets. Our token engine becomes, design tokens from our token engine become consumable artifacts as the end result of the build process. Those artifacts are then applied within our design system, and then those styles and things can be released. Then with the use of asset sets, we've got individual collections of CSS and JavaScript, and then we can assign those to essentially different themes. They can be added to a global available space so that you can have all the themes available for every component, or you can do that by component basis. Stuff comes together with the ability to toggle these themes with our theme switcher, which we're going to see in a live demo that's going to be coming up. So live demo time. I am now looking at the local workspace that I pulled down for a workspace that I like to work inside of. I'm a big Marvel fan. You'll see I'm using my Stark t-shirt today. And so I like to build into my little Marvel design system. This is just mine for fun. So No one get too excited here. But this is just the local Knapsack workspace. I'm going to go ahead and start it up. And while this is starting, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at side of some of the structure that I've got here. And inside of our styles, I've got some themes. And this is that theming mapping layer that I was going to be creating and working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy one of these. So we've got sort of this like global level. We've got things for like our button, our card, our nav marks. We've just got some base components, and we'll sort of look at those here in just a moment. And we're going to call this the Space Viking theme, if anyone can guess which theme we're going to be building here. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and open up Knapsack for us so we can see this working locally. And here's the design system that I was looking at. And we take a look at components. I've just got some basic stuff in here. I've got button, a card, a nav bar, and I've assembled all of this inside of a layout component that allows us to get this kind of like application in one little space here. And this was the theme switcher that I was just talking about through the use of asset sets. So we've got an asset set for our iconic theme. We've got one for God of Mischief here, as well as Wakanda Forever. For you folks that were on the last call, we assembled this one. And so we're going to go ahead and adding our new Space Viking to this thing right away. And we're going to be using this with our design tokens. So first things first, I'm actually going to stop this so I can go ahead and adjust the asset sets here. So if I go down here, I'm just going to duplicate our Wakanda theme. We're going to adjust this to Space Viking. And let's make sure I change them all. Let's see here, save. Oh, did I? I may have copied one too many. There we go. And then of course, what I always forget to do is add it to this global asset sets ID. So let's not forget that. Okay, we've got our global asset set ID. We've got our new asset set down here, which is referencing, again, all the same things that our theme was using before. We're using normalize. We're still going to use our design tokens, but now we're just using this different mapping layer. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up. Oh, live demo. Hold on one second. Data should not have additional properties. Let me re-add this. See, this is good. Live demos are good. Okay, so stable state. Good thing this is a concise demo, so we can run through this multiple times here. Space Viking. All right, that's looking a lot better. Now we get our rocket ship here. So it means our workspace should be updated. I'm gonna go ahead and restart this. Now we should see our Space Viking here. Now I just cloned the Loki theme. So we haven't really gone too deep here. But what we're gonna do here is we're gonna add some design tokens and just kind of keep this rolling. So if we actually look at design tokens inside of our colors, I've already got some stuff here for our iconic theme, God of Mischief theme. You'll see that all of these are really pointing from these two like primary colors. And so I'm going to go into our tokens admin interface. We can see we've got our iconic theme, and here's all the values we're using. We've got Loki, we've got our Wakanda theme, and so we're going to add a new one. You guessed it, Space Viking. Next, we're going to go ahead and add a token group. We're going to call this color. We're going to add a token, and we're going to call this red. And I'm going to grab my handy dandy hex value here. Add that. Okay. Grab another color. Let's add blue. All right. Oops. I want that to be a valid hex color. All right, we need another group for our font family. So token group, font family. And when we're talking about tokens can be referenced, we're going to reference a token here. So we've already got in our global space, we were talking about ways to do this. We've got our font family. And so we're going to use this inside of our new theme. So let's go back to Space Viking. Let's go back. So we've already got our Space Viking font family. And so let's say, oh, I should have grabbed the value for that. 1 second, global font family. There it is. So if I grab this, go back down to here. Let me just redo this. Should be heading. There we go. Now I've got a reference token in here. We'll add a reference token. Great. So all these things are in place. And we could actually see these things if we take a look at our packages, our design tokens. We've got sort of these new Space Viking tokens that are in here. Space Viking red and Space Viking blue. And so really all we need to do at this point is map these things. So I'm going to go ahead and go back over to our Space Viking theme. And just like a cooking show, I'm just going to go ahead and put this in the oven and pull these out. But I'm just basically just changed really these 3 values up here: theme heading, font, color primary, color secondary. And of course, I'm also going to swap out our default thumbnail. I'm going to save this and let's go back to our components. Let's take a look at our layout and then let's see our Space Viking theme. And there it is. We just assembled a brand new theme. And this is all set and ready to go using brand new design tokens. Even with some little hurdles, we were able to get that out pretty quickly, actually. And so one of the things I love about this is we can actually see this in context. So if I wanted to open these up, I could see, our, let's see, let's take a look at this. Let's get the Wakanda Forever theme out here as well. And then we can do some fun things like, let's get these all side by side. What's really great about this too is that, if I wanted to actually, and I do this sometimes when I'm getting ready for webinars, if I want to build the theme and see how my changes to global components are going to affect other things, I can do that. And all these things will give me sort of a live reload. And so if I went into, let's say, actually, let's go back into, Knapsack. And let's go ahead and change the value of our card just to kind of bring this home. And let's go to our React component and new on Marvel Unlimited. Let's add some exclamation points and sort of make this a loud demo. Oh, actually, I forgot. So any stylistic changes or template changes will be reflected, but these are actually like timestamped to the demo I just created. But that's kind of like pulling it all together. That's kind of showing how all these things are, brought together. And as many themes as I have, I could have these all up and be kind of showing these off. So that is implementing root level theming inside of Knapsack with design tokens. Next, we're going to pass this over to Evan. Actually, I'll go ahead and give a nice little introduction. So we're delighted to have our head of product and engineering share with us today our company's vision for design tokens and our roadmap for the future. As the industry continues to evolve, design systems have become increasingly important to ensure consistency, scalability, and speed in the digital product development space. Out of that space, design tokens are emerging as a powerful tool that enables organizations to manage design assets more efficiently and effectively at scale. In this section, our head of product and engineering will discuss how Knapsack thinks about design tokens. They will also be sharing with us our company's roadmap, highlighting our upcoming projects and the exciting new capabilities we're developing to serve our clients' needs.
Hey, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time. So I want to talk a little bit about where some things are going in the bigger industry and also at Knapsack. So, as the title says, design token standards are coming. So, and it is a really, really good thing to be able to have. It is allowing disparate teams and tools and frameworks to kind of speak the same language without having to collaborate. it's kind of like having free import and export between all of your different tools. And, you know, as the talk says, being basically sustainable and scalable, this is like how you can do that, because we all know we move between tools and frameworks very frequently, and we want to take our content with us. And your tokens are your content. They're all your brand decisions that have been painstakingly made. And so you don't want to have to rewrite all of them. And so being a little aware of this standard, so the way that you build your tokens can be moved into different tools or into this different standard, is a good thing. Now, maybe there might be a little bit of massaging of data or something like that, but conceptually, if there is alignment, it's going to work with a lot of things. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the things that the standard's talking about. And I would highly encourage checking out those resources right there. That conference talk is digestible by, you know, people of all disciplines, not just, you know, engineers who are going to get a kick out of that. I think that's a great primer on this stuff. Really, really great YouTube talk. And then, of course, there's the nitty-gritty details in the actual spec. It's actually probably one of the least scary specs, but that's also probably because we're really passionate about design tokens. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to read. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so it starts with basically there being these like, let's go ahead and add types to tokens. So, you know, people have already had kind of like, hey, let's group and name these. You know, everybody thinks that JSON is going to be, or is the way you want to store it, because it can turn into a lot of formats. But I want to talk a little bit about like the types, because these are the building blocks, all the really, really fun stuff. And so being able to think about, hey, I want to have tokens, a single token that represents a single type. That is what I would like you to have for like a takeaway, at least from my part here today, is that if you create tokens that are just a color and not like, you know, something that could get passed to the background CSS property that would include not just color, but like maybe an image URL. It was a little silly example, but I think you see my point here. It's basically having like atomic design decision. So going through it, you know, color, the spec says hex code and, you know, by the way, 8-character hex codes work for transparency. You're probably not going to be, you know, in a really bad situation if you're using RGBA or HSLA. I think that's going to be an easy translation, but hey, that's what the spec says is go with the hex code. I think that a lot of that is because they can get translated into iOS and Android a lot easier. So then dimension. I think this is one of the more flexible ones, you know, because something that you can legally pass in CSS the same value to border radius as you can to like a breakpoint. But we all know that that would never, ever get shared. But nonetheless, it is a legal value to be able to share. And we can talk a little bit about what communicates purpose and intent here in a little bit, but let's talk about what's like a legal type and dimension, right? So that's going to be basically like 12 pixels or 1.5 rem. They also say, hey, just stick with px or rem. Again, I don't think that you're going to be in like the worst case scenario if you use like a percentage or an EM. But again, just kind of highlighting what the spec says there. I think that really like spacing has probably got to be one of its biggest like purpose and intent. I think that's one of the all-stars in design tokens after color. And actually, by the way, color, you know, it's really background color, font color, border color, probably even some gradient stops in there. But you know, with the actual valid types, we got color, dimension, and then we're getting into font family, which is pretty straightforward. You know, this obviously is not including everything that you have to do to get that font to work, like font face and stuff. And then font weight, that has a, you know, you can do different numbers, and then also like the valid values in CSS, bold, normal, etc. And then duration. This I found pretty interesting that they had settled in on an MS, so it's millisecond suffix. It makes sense though a little bit, because when it was just a number and you saw like 10, is that 10 seconds or 0.01 second? So big difference there. So, you know, having all of your durations as 250 ms is probably a good thing to be able to do. And then of course, you know, the other animation favorite is cubic Bezier. And so this is what really brings a lot of life into animation, is because it's not just moving something from point A to point B at the same speed and same acceleration. It's what basically makes something feel like it starts off slow and ends fast. And so anyway, that is basically like 4 numbers. You know, in CSS, that's basically the 4 numbers that get passed to the cubic Bezier function. And then of course numbers. So this is pretty flexible here. I got a couple examples up there. They actually even do say that like some, you know, strings and booleans are also, you know, valid. So these are the low-level basic types that the design token spec has in there. And so these are the building blocks that will stick around. These are the things that basically like will sustain. And, you know, and so, so let's go to the next slide and talk about what we can do once you get this stuff built up. Okay, so they have in there composite tokens. And so we're going to talk about one specific one, shadow. So composite tokens are basically built up from those low-level tokens. Now they can be hard-coded. So, you know, if there's a spot for color, it can be a hex code, but it could also reference your primary brand color. Now, you need 5 tokens, no more, no less, to build a shadow. And so you need the actual color, which of course is a color. And then you need 4 different dimensions. And so, you know, putting these together, then you have a complete shadow. And so the thing is, this might seem kind of obvious there, but it's almost kind of like a data contract for something a little bit more complex. So what happens if you have multiple shadows? If you know that there is a contract, that means that one can get swapped out for another. And you know, I think actually this can get scaled up to like what you saw Jake doing, is that the entire theme is probably a composite. Now, I don't know if I'd call it a composite token, but nonetheless, I mean, Jake had a data contract to satisfy. You know, there was a primary color and a secondary color, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And you could even think about basically like spacing getting filled out. You know, you're going to have your small, medium, large spacing, and each of those have to put in something. So in Gmail's cozy, compact, what's the other one again? It's basically 3 spacing ones. So basically being able to change that like feeling of Gmail and just the spacing value, you know, that is basically like, all right, you have to have all of those token kind of like slots, if you will. Basically, it must be satisfied, no more, no less. And so that's what I think is really interesting about this, the composites. They get into a lot more composite tokens that are planned. Some of them are still being discussed. And so it's something that like the format might change a little bit. The stuff I'd mentioned earlier, all of the W3C is like, yep, that's solid. We're going to stick with that. So the composite token, you can't do the composite tokens without the low level ones. So that is why I kind of emphasize more on that. Breaking your tokens up to, you know, low level solid pieces is a very good call. Again, like dimension, you know, being a single like 5 pixel value, as opposed to, you know, something that is using multiple spacing values, like that could get passed to padding. It's going to be a little less flexible.